One thing is very interesting. Tagore, as an artist, was fundamentally different from Ray as an artist. Whatever Ray did all his life for 50 unbroken years, from 1942 to 1992, or 1941 to 1942 to 1992, whatever he ever did in drawing were all for children. Actually, he dedicated his entire life for the children of Bengal. He wrote stories from them, adventurous stories, detective stories, so that they could try to continue learning Bengali, continue learning Bengali and reading Bengali and loving Bengali. And his stories often had international backgrounds. That was very important. Background was international, but the stories were Bengali often. And he had a great love for the very ordinary people. In a span of 50 years, as an artist, Ray drew hundreds of very ordinary people and tried to bring out the courage, the beauty, and all the inner things, the outward expressions of the inner things, which is usually covered by a sort of semi-poverty of the lower middle class. And I felt he had a sort of a cynicism about the people of the upper class who got the chances. He always says chances to read great books, big books, and dedicated their time, 30, 40, 50 years in reading important things. But Ray was completely different, and he always tried to discover beautiful things, mainly beauty and power and intelligence in the ordinary people. And Tagore was completely abstract. He couldn't plan a painting before starting the painting. He just snatch a paper from anywhere he could get from the corner of the table and just started drawing. Just he drew a line and replied the line with another line and replied to those lines through another 3 lines. It's like playing tabla and sitar freely, or a modern band. Actually, what is ironic is that even after being a poet from the age of 7 or 8, what is very interesting in all the poems, all the songs ever written by Tagore, is that he was a non-visual, a sort of anti-visual poet. He could not describe the beauty of the nature. If he even described in the first line, he always goes to the inner meaning, the inner spirituality sort of thing, or I don't know, should I say, a sort of quantum physical analysis of the nature that is being expressed in the nature, expressed in small things and things very big. He often described the billions and billions and billions of stars. They exist because we want to see the stars in the sky. It was a very strange thing because he tried to write this, what should I say? Can I say that it could be named the quantum songs, not the spiritual songs. He never, you know, he never sort of, what should I say? Pujo kora in English, worship. He never worshipped God in his songs. Never worshipped God in his songs. Actually, what he worshipped are the quantum powers that are inner power that created the cosmos. And he started writing this type of songs in 1910. It's strange because he and Einstein had a long talk, a sort of a debate. No one could understand each other. No one could understand each other. But now it has been proved in the laboratory, physics laboratory, 6 months ago, like the duality of the wave and the particle. He knew these kind of things in 1910. Even these kind of things have been described pages after pages in Gitanjali, the song offerings, for which he won the Nobel Prize, which was unimportant, I think, because the songs were, the human beings were not advanced enough that time to understand the songs. There is no spirituality or worship. It was a sort of a scientific curiosity and sort of a worship of the ecological balance that should be the aim of human beings. It was his dharma. It was his religion. Now, I should try to say something about Tagore. How did he draw? It is a light piece and it's slightly oversimplified. It's like this. His footsteps were completely silent. None could ever predict when he would arrive in the room. Let's imagine you were painting, sitting cross-legged on the floor, engrossed in the fluidity of your brush, creating waves on the paper. Suddenly you felt on your shoulder the soft touch of a big bum. Between 1901 and 1941, because after that he was no more, you shouldn't have startled had you lived in Shantiniketan, where Tagore established his university. Because because you had known before turning back that Tagore was standing behind you. For how long? You couldn't ever have guessed it correctly. But the soft touch had already reassured you. Then you turned your head to find quite a tall man with a very soft and generous smile being seen through his white and flowing beard, standing behind you, staring straight at your eyeballs, with his own eyes almost glowing with white fire. Well, was the fire in his eyes real or an illusion created by awe? You couldn't have ever been sure, but you could see it. Albert Einstein saw it. So did the widow of the Soviet filmmaker, Sergei Eisenstein. It was true for all the students learning in the University of Tagore, learning the university that Tagore had established in Bengal. On the basis of this simple description of Rabindranath Tagore, we can find two elements almost contrasting in his character. One, non-imposing, reassuring, and affectionate. That is expressed through his silent footsteps. And the two, a secret fire burning in his heart. That is expressed through his glowing eyes. These two elements have driven Tagore to two opposite directions. The first element created in him a poet, singer, and finally the lyricist and composer of nearly 2,500 songs, immortal songs, including operas. It must be confessed here that 2,500 is possibly an astronomical number in reference to songs. While composing songs and poems, Tagore was soft and enduring and non-imposing. Let me give you a simple instance to illustrate how uncomplaining he could have been, even when writing highly political songs. It's globally accepted that the special genre of music needs intense anger and a mood of assault. For instance, Beethoven's Turkish March. But what Tagore did was diametrically opposite. Why and how? For explaining this, let me tell you a small yet real story from the pages of the history of India. Till the first decade of 20th century, a province of the eastern part of India, Bengal, was quite a big one. The word Bengal must be globally known for two reasons. One is a sea and the other is a loving creature, Bay of Bengal and Royal Bengal tiger. So Bengal, the Bengal word, is known, I think, globally. At that time, India was under the British rule. In 1905, the British decided the extensive province of Bengal would be divided into two parts, east and west. A considerably large part of the people, ordinary as well as intelligentsia, stood against the division of Bengal. Though some of the Bengalis supported it, but the problem was that then politicians could not persuade the British ruler to change their mind. Exactly at that time, what Tagore did was purely unparalleled. He wrote only 26 songs, short and simple songs, summoning people of the East and West to remain united. East and West of Bengal, obviously. Now, how were the songs? Did those express an uncontrollable anger? Were those war calls, marching songs? No, not at all. And that's most surprising. Even the words like British or guns or firing or blood or death and so on didn't come even for words in any of the songs. Even the songs were totally oblivious of the words imperialism. In spite of that, the songs inspired all the people to fight and remain united. On 5th October 1905, in the morning, the people of Calcutta witnessed something which was no less than a miracle. It was like this. Tagore the poet was leading a procession of hundreds of people. He was singing his new songs in his soft voice, but it sounded like a sea roaring behind him because the number of people following him was being dramatically increased. The procession became 100,000 strong. Even the British police force didn't try to stop the demonstration. It was told that even the police force was hypnotized as well by the magic of the Tagore compositions. But how were the songs? Let me give you an example. My Bengal of gold, I love you. Forever your skies, your air, set my heart in tune, as if it were a flute. O spring, in spring, O mother mine, the fragrance of your mango groves makes me wild with joy. Ah, what a thrill. In autumn, O mother mine, in the full blossoms paddy field, I have seen sprayed all over your sweet smiles. What's most remarkable in the song, remarkable is that the British government was never ever mentioned in the song. Even while protesting against world conquering empire, Tagore didn't try to make his followers bloodthirsty, to call his followers shoot a bullet. Instead, the poet reminded them the fragrance of the mango grove and the smiles of the paddy field. Tagore did something more remarkable. He totally ignored the presence of British rulers in India. And that ignorance dramatically diminished the value of the British power as well as British merchandise. Tagore only reminded us of the beauty and peace that only Bengal could give you. Thus he made everything else immaterial. It was and still is a more sensitive, more intelligent, more valid way of protesting against the tormentors. Yet the purpose was served. The partition of Bengal was told. The British rulers were stunned to see the inexplicable power of the Tagore songs to inspire as well as unite the people, overcoming the unavoidable diversity. Tagore was there 53. Now let's come to a new Tagore, 70-year-old. Please imagine you are watching a spectacle yourself. A writing table, almost innumerable small bottles of writing ink, scattered on it, oil pastels, pencils, brushes, and watercolors are seen strewn around.